don't have any notes either specifically. But
Okay. This is the 38th anniversary of the tremendous victory for Judaism. And I want to begin by telling you something, especially to Mr. Lewin, that I never told you before. But I'm gonna
you've
tell you
kept
that.
a secret for 38 years. Okay.
Some other people know about it, and that is, well, first of all, let me just give you the scenario how things were here 48 years ago during the spring. You're not sure of the exact date or month even when this theft was discovered. But what happened was one of the librarians was in the previous Rebbe's uh, office on the second floor where the Rebbe lived and saw people, guests, Yechidus it's called. And what's that? And the Rebbe's room, where his office there was no wallpaper, it was books. All four walls were solid books, various sizes, and they looked, it was a magnificent sight. And one day, one of the librarians walked into that room. Uh, as I said, it was springtime, and noticed there was some space between some of the books, which means somebody had to take out books. The Rebbe himself was not alive then, and that room was hardly ever occupied or visited even. And if something was missing, it was very suspicious and very painful. And as days went by, the young man went in and noticed every few days there are some more books missing. So had no idea who the thief could be. And one of our people set up a camera at the entrance at some place that the person would have to go by to enter the previous Rebbe's office. And he found that it was the Rebbe's grandson, the previous Rebbe's grandson, and a nephew of our Rebbe. Well, that was very scary for a number of reasons. And the Rebbe was told about it, and at one of the Shabbos gatherings at that time of the year, the Rebbe spoke about the theft, and he was pleading with Hasidim to do something to get whatever was taken to get it retrieved. And it so happens that the Rebbe appointed me to the board of Agudas Chassidic Chabad in 1970. I was the
So
youngest.
what happened to your mouth over here? The lip got bit?
What?
Or bleeding a little bit?
Okay, here we go. Come on, Ta, have a seat. Here we go.
Are we okay? And the youngest person on the board of 7 people was old enough to be my grandfather. So I felt very honored that given this position. There was no crisis, but it came to play in various things in the subsequent years. So, and the Rebbe's talking, his pain on a person who never showed pain was obvious. And the manner of speech and the way he was sitting in the chair, sort of in an awkward position, was very painful for Chassidim, who loved him so much and respected him so much that he was enduring. So one Shabbos in the beginning of the month of Tammuz, which is like July of that year, 38 years ago, the let me say that something had to be done. After a strong talk on Shabbos about the theft, Sunday morning I decided that I'm going to call a meeting of the AGUCH Chassidic Chabad. I was a board member, and I had the authority to do that. And Sunday noontime, I gathered about 6, 7 people of the elders. As I said, I was the youngest by far, together in an office in 770 Eastern Parkway. And I said, look, we were all together yesterday, and we saw the Rebbe, we heard the Rebbe, and the pain just, it's beyond description. And we have to do something. The Rebbe said at that talk that it belongs to AGUCH Chassidic Chabad, and they should be responsible for rectifying the situation, and as they will find possible and necessary. And so that's why I called the meeting of senior members of AGUCH Chassidic Chabad. And I was unsuccessful. They all had reasons. They were afraid of this, they were afraid of that, and everybody left the meeting in its a rotten state. The next day, Nat will be my witness. I couldn't sleep. I woke him up after midnight. I hope you'll forgive me, Nat. I think you did. I hope you did. I decided that I'm going to call a lawyer. I didn't consult the Rebbe. I didn't ask him if we should do this. I was too broken, and the Rebbe was too broken. I wanted to do something, and nobody else was doing anything. I'm gonna take him to federal court. So I called Mr. Lewin and told him what happened, and he mentioned to me, if I recall correctly, that it's good that the books were taken from New York State to New Jersey, because it's what went wrong?
Well, it wasn't just that the books were taken to New Jersey. As I recall the conversation in the middle of the night, because you did wake us up, I recall that you told me that there had been a camera put in, and the person who took the books was discovered. And the question was whether to report the theft to the police and make a criminal case. And I asked who was identified. And you said that it was the nephew of the Rebbe. I said, I don't think you really want to make a criminal case out of this immediately. The thing to do is to go to court. And what court can we go to? Since Chabad is in Brooklyn, if this fellow is in Brooklyn, then you'd have to go to a state court. There's no federal jurisdiction. And you said to me, oh, he lives in New Jersey. Because he lives in New Jersey, that gives a federal court jurisdiction. And therefore, I said we should go to federal court. Yes. And you agreed and came. I mean, we met the next day, I think, and my recollection is that I was shown a copy of the Choshen Mishpat, which had marginal annotations about the fact that if somebody would not listen to Bezdin, you can go to a secular court. And you and the Rebbe were very meticulous to show me that this was permissible al pi halacha. And I recall having seen that page with the annotations about being permitted to go to a secular court. Yeah. And that's what we did.
Yes, but I didn't tell the Rebbe that I'm going to call an attorney and make a federal case out of this. First of all, I just thought I got to do something. I wasn't confused. I was perfectly lucid, but I felt something had to be done. I also realized that this is an uncle and a nephew. If it's going to end up in that the uncle's asking the nephew, it'll become a Bubba Mice. It'll become off color. It'll become all kinds of uncomfortable family life. It's an uncle and a nephew.
This is what you look like when you speak.
Oh, my.
People are complaining.
There you go. Is this better?
You tell me.
Yes, better. So what I did, I called you, Nat, and I met you in New York the next day at the Schlam Solon Dolan or something like that. That was the name of the law firm.
That was the firm that we also used in addition to Miller, Cassidy, Baruch, and Lewin. I used them as well because they were familiar with federal court in Brooklyn. Appeared there frequently. They had been graduates of the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of New York.
Yeah. I like them. They were nice people. I liked them. We eventually had a very good time with them. And you said you're going to be in New York on the next day, and I'll meet you in the office and bring you some documents pertaining to the validity of Agudat Chassidic Chabad. So what happened was I met with you and gave you some of the documents, but I didn't tell the Rebbe yet what I did. And you went to court, I think, Judge Glazer, was it Wednesday or Thursday of that week? And I asked you that since Barry, the thief, was already selling books in the open market of precious Hebrew publications and books for huge sums of money. They even took some Kunabala that he was going to ready to sell in his house. I said, we have to stop the bleeding. He's in the market. He's selling books. We'll never see these books again, probably. And the library will fall apart. And the Rebbe couldn't take it. He was so upset physically. So I think you got 2 federal marshals sent by the judge to his home in New Jersey and impounded the 400 volumes of books he already stole and were in his house, and put them in a bonded safe with protection, and at least the bleeding had stopped.
Well, just in terms of the sequence, my office drafted a complaint. I'm not even sure that at the very beginning Schlamstone and Dolan were involved, but we filed the complaint, and by the system, of selection in the Eastern District of New York, the judge who was assigned to the case was Judge Sifton, but he was on vacation. So in order to get a temporary restraining order and an order that would enable us to recover the books and to keep Barry from selling any others, we had to go to a federal judge and appear before a federal judge. So the judge who was then on emergency assignment was Judge Glazer, who was Jewish.
Yeah.
And we were told by the clerk to go there, and Barry had been notified, and he hired Hellerstein as his lawyer. And so we had a session in Judge Glazer's chambers. The interesting thing is that when we walked into Judge Glazer's chambers, I had not really appeared before Judge Glazer any time previously. So I didn't know what his chambers were like. But the interesting thing was that when you walked in the door, I still recall on the left of the door, as you came in on the wall, very ornate framing, was the Shar Daf, the first page of a Rambam, which he had apparently had on very meticulously framed and put up in his office. Judge Glazer did. So we appeared there, before him in his office, in his chambers, to argue about this restraining order that we had requested. And Hellerstein showed up for that to represent Barry. And Judge Glazer, one of his first questions was, shouldn't this be decided by a rabbinic court? He knew enough about halakha and Jewish practice to ask that. And I responded that since it was not certain that a rabbinic court would be obeyed by Barry, we had to go to a secular court. So I explained that to the judge. And then at that point also, Hellerstein said, well, in addition to Barry, a party who would want to join in this case is Barry's mother. And the question was, where is she a resident? And it turned out she was also a resident, technically could be considered a resident of New Jersey. So we agreed that she would be a defendant together with Barry. And then the judge ordered that the restraining order be issued, that the books be placed in a safe place, be recovered and placed in custody pending the outcome of the lawsuit. Because we said what we want is we want a restraining order and an injunction. And Hellerstein said, no, we want the court to decide who owns this library. That was his demand. Let the court decide who owns the library. Because we still, at your instruction and in terms of halacha, we're still feeling that if we could recover the Sfarim, then if this would go to a Bezdin, it would have to go to some Bezdin. But Hellerstein said, no, the court should decide who owns this. And the judge then issued the order, and the books were placed in custody. And we went through a whole series of pre-trial discovery after that, which
Well, yeah, I had arranged with the Rosh Hashiva, Rabbi Pekarsky, in studying the laws of going to court, to non-Jewish courts, and it was okay. It was kosher, 100%. But a day after, the week that you appeared before Judge Glazer, I went into the Rebbe's room, and I told him what I did. I hadn't told him till the books were saved. The bleeding had stopped, and he looked at me quizzically. He wasn't sure whether he's going to fire me for doing what I did, or he's going to accept what I did. I was really, I didn't know where my life is going to go, literally. And he tells me, he said it in Yiddish, "Du bist doch a chassid von Schwer. You are a chassid of my father-in-law." And I looked at the Rebbe. I don't. What did that mean? I knew the previous Rebbe. I had occasion to be blessed by him, but why is the Rebbe sending me off to his father-in-law who was deceased? And he says, "You once had a blessing from my father-in-law, did you not? Did you not see him for your bar mitzvah and get his blessing that was 40 years before? I didn't know how the Rebbe knew that what a young bar mitzvah boy wanted to his father-in-law for a blessing. But that's true." He said, well, since he blessed you, everything is going to work out fine. And then I felt better, being that he actually appreciated what I did. And he says to me, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, loved the Jewish people, but Pinchas had to do what he did. the implication meaning, you know the story in the Bible about Pinchas, the man by the name of one of the judges in a non-Jewish court and community did something wrong, and it had to do with prostitution, etc. And everybody, the people around were just still. They didn't know what to do, what action to take. So Pinchas came along, not Moses, but Pinchas came along and struck that person who was doing foul things. What he meant to say was, Moses loved the Jewish people. He was referring sort of to himself, his leadership. He loves the Jewish people, but I could not do what you could do, and what you did, he was very, very grateful for, and that was the beginning of our salvation. Instead of being, I was fearing I would be fired, he accepted it with flying colors, and then we went on to win the case. Shlomo, you have anything to say?
Well, I don't know, whether you want me to pick up anything in terms of the proceedings afterwards, because again, we went through extensive discovery and
3 weeks.
and
Through Hanukkah.
and the Rebbe, Allah Shalom, of course, testified very dramatically. Her testimony was actually read at the trial. Her statement that certainly the library belonged to the Hasidim because her father belonged to the Hasidim. It was very dramatic. I had not prepared her to say that, but she volunteered it at the very end of her deposition. And of course, it has been remembered by Chabad and memorialized ever since.
She was in her 80s at that time. A beautiful, wonderful, brilliant woman. You know, who could the Rebbe marry other than her? She had all the qualities, and she was the Rebbe's middle daughter. He had three daughters. She was the middle one, and she was totally composed when she had the deposition. She never had a deposition in her life before that, and she was so cool, calm, and collected. The way she spoke in English, and when it came to the last question, when the opposing attorneys decided that they're going to ask her point blank, did your father own those books, or was it the community? And she said, my father belonged to the community. And of course, his books did then too. And that was it. I think when the last day of the trial, which was just before, in the end of December, and the judge was going off to the City of Lights to Paris, he has to see her testimony. And they brought a television set to the judge's desk. And he wanted to see that statement that she made. He looked at it for about 5 or 10 minutes, and he said, remarkable. I was surprised that he said that, like almost taking our side. But it was brilliant, it was beautiful, and she saved Chabad, what should I say?
So, well, during the trial, I can go into detail about the trial itself.
I don't know if we have enough time for that tonight.
That's just it. I will tell this group that
you want to talk about the Tanya that was out tonight?
How many years ago?
1993. 31 years ago, and it's very deep.
What was this?
firm's records on this case were unfortunately destroyed in a flood that the company that was holding our records had on its premises. So I do not have a transcript of the trial.
I have a complete transcript.
If you could, somebody here could send me a complete transcript of the trial.
You need a trailer truck.
Very appreciative.
It's huge. The paperwork is huge.
I know it was 11 days of trial. It's a lot of pages, but to the extent that it's possible for somebody to put those together and send them to me at my home, it would be very much appreciated, because I do not have access to that trial. And in terms of the court, I've gone sometimes back to the court computer, and they no longer make that transcript available. It's not possible for me to get it from the court.
Well, it is safe and sound. We'll have to find somebody to.
If somebody could make a copy and a set to send to me, I would appreciate it. I mean, it's been 38 years since Hey Teves, and I was trying to think of a gematria that would be appropriate for 38. And the best I could come up with was Kvodo. This was Kuf Beis Vav Daled Vav, which adds up to 38. And this was an important case in terms of the respect for the Rebbe. And it is 38 years since. And the interesting thing is, this case was decided January 6th, 1987. That was Hey Teves. Hey Teves has not come out on January 6th, not even one time in those 38 years. Today is as close as you get to January 6th, January 5. And that has only happened one time. So far as I can tell, I don't know when, if ever, again, there will be a Hey Teves, which coincides with the calendar of January 6th, which is the date that this opinion has in terms of Judge Sifton having issued it on January 6th, which was Hey Teves.
Yeah, interesting.
It's a funny trivia point with regard to this case.
I consider the library the keys to the kingdom.
Well,
the Rebbe, previous Rebbe, and all the Rebbes had very valuable, important libraries, and the Rebbe was spoiled, ruined, broken. So thank God we put back the keys, so he has a complete control of the kingdom.
Yes. Well, the Rebbe, 2 days later, I came up to Crown Heights, and there was an amazing celebration in Crown Heights at 770.
You spoke there.
Yes, I did. And it has been a yontif ever since, a yontif for books. I mean, you see from what's behind me, just a small section of the impact that books have had on my life. But the Rebbe was a yontif for Sfarim, to give Sfarim, to read Sfarim, to learn Sfarim. That was what Hey Teves was all about.
And still is.
And still is, and continues to be.
Anybody else online?
I wish to say, first of all, a gewaltige yeshikor to Rav Krinsky, and a gewaltige yeshikor to Nate Lewin for the incredible roles that they have played in freeing the Rebbe's books. While we sit here today, the fight goes on to liberate the Rebbe's books. The books that were taken away by the Russians and ultimately put in storages in different places, not figuring we ever could find out that it was there. And we tried everything. The Rebbe called me. Rebbe said, Shlomo, Baruch Manayis, as the Svarim stand in ganz, that the books are okay. The Dav Zen, Mishtadl Zen, so you have to get a work on it. Jerry Weintraub had a good friend, his name is Ahmed Hammer, that man just can't get him. I'm shortening a very long story. But whatever the case is, that's how the mission for the books in Russia really started. And then afterwards, it's tens and tens and tens of years that we have been fighting this battle. Baruch Hashem, our children, and our children are adults. Our boys were recognized so strongly by the Rebbe. Cunin Zazun, first in Washington. In Washington. Cunin Zazun, first and so forth. They carried the flag when I was stuck still in Russia. What we have to do now is recognize what the Rebbe said to us then. As soon as this crazy story happened, the Rebbe was speaking on Shabbos. And the Rebbe says, boy avant. You can't use a hammer and nails on Shabbos to build a wall by the second floor, but you could use yourself, which is not so bad either. And I sat there till one of the librarians, I don't want to say his name, looks up at me and says, Du bist Shlomo, you're also with them? Bist mit sie? I said, ich bin mit dem Rebbe. And ich will nicht Herrn von euch gar nicht. And that's the first way we saw. Previous to that, the Rebbe said he wanted mitzvah tanks. And he wanted every type of mitzvah to be ratcheted up more and more and more to get rid of the horrific darkness in this world. And that's what we are doing the whole time. And what's so important from all of this is that we should always recognize we will win. Victory is ours. That's all that you could say. Because the Rebbe said, Shlomo kommt zuvor mit den Svarim, mit Mashiach and zusammen. Come with the Svarim together with Mashiach. And in fact, tomorrow is the day we came back with Vice President Gore from Moscow, where he was able to receive the personal Tanya of the Frierdiker Rebbe. And he gave it to me in Moscow. He said, my agents are going to stay with you till you're on the plane of a different airline versus the Russians. Till you take off. I don't trust them. And that's what it was. That's the Tanya we gave the Rebbe. That's 31 years ago. And that's what it's all about. You got to keep on fighting. That's the only way, the only answer. And after that, you get 100 senators. Out of 100 senators sent letters, please give back the Rebbe's books. They asked, why only 100 senators in the Senate? We said, there's only 100 senators in the Senate, as far as that's concerned. And likewise from the Congress, and everything else along those lines. Everybody has to reach out to your Congress people. We're headed for the Supreme Court. Everybody has to reach out to their Congress people, Congress senators, to get from them a Mika Security, a letter of support for this incredible mitzvah that's been going on. Pidyon Shurim. That's what it is. The last Yechitas had by the Rebbe, the Mamish, the Rebbe speaking in an incredible way. We had freed the first personal file of the Rabbi from Russia. It's a picture of Rabbi in it, etc., etc., etc. Now we have it. You gave it to the Rebbe looked at it, his eyes. There's a terrible picture of Levi, whatever. Terrible, terrible. But then, after that, Rebbe looks up at me and says, Shlomo, so es wissen, jeder des Tvorim seine Bashivya ist a Mitzvah von Pidyon Shurim. Ich darf dir nicht sagen, keine Inyanim. Ich darf dir nicht sagen, no. Mitzvah from Pidyon Shurim, that goes on today. We have to have the fullest support for this, both within our community and communities around the world and all of this. And when we will do it, it's going to be God bless you all.
Thank you, Rabbi Cunin. What I wanted to say is that tonight, as Rabbi Cunin mentioned, and Nat mentioned, and Rabbi Krinsky's mentioned about this being the day of victory, it turns out that it's the same exact calendar that was not just the year that happened when Dida Netzach was, but the year that Vice President Gore showed up to Moscow and showed up with his big plane there, pulled up to the Russian State Library, then it was called the Lenin Library, with his motorcade. It was on Thursday, so it was like this past Thursday, the last day of Hanukkah, Zos Hanukkah, and there was snow all throughout Moscow, and they had no way of cleaning up the snow. But in front of that Russian State Library, for the first time ever, and that I've seen it, that they cleaned the snow in front for the Vice President of the United States of America to pull up there, walk into the building, and walk out with a Tanya. And you have to think about the kavod malachim that they gave to the United States government back at the time, who was sponsoring everything in Russia and throughout the Soviet Union with all the aid. It was unbelievable just to see that moment of what that Tanya being returned was. And it took us till Sunday, understandably, to come to New York, which would have been like this Sunday, Hey Teves. And this is part of the gathering that we have here tonight, is really to take in that moment. Because people for all the time say, well, the Russians are never going to give you the books. It's never going to happen. And I'm like, yes, they've done it. It took the Vice President of the United States of America to fly out there and get it, but it happened. And the rest, well, it's just a matter of getting the rest right now. Well, they don't adhere to the law. They do, and they did return it. And now we're looking for the rest of them to be returned. And to spare that case, leading it now is our attorney, Steve Lieberman, who's on with us. Good yontif, Steve. And for over 10 years now, been litigating in the federal courts, the same courts that the Rebbe authorized to sue Barry Garari and those who were holding this firm at the time. The same structure of courts is where the Russian government is now being held. And I want to give a big yosher koyach to Stephen and to Nat, who's been involved with it, and for this tonight to give us the strength that we need to move forward. So I'd like to welcome in Steve to the conversation.
Thank you, Rabbi Cunin. I'm honored to be here today to help celebrate the 38th anniversary of the liberation of the Rebbe's books. As part of a team led by Rabbi Krinsky and Rabbi Baruch Shlomo Cunin and his sons, Rabbi Yossi Cunin and Rabbi Chaim Cunin. On this day, I have news to report to you on two of the cases in which Chabad has been fighting to obtain the return of additional materials. First, the return of the Schneerson collection of books stolen by the Soviet Union during the Bolshevik Revolution, and then improperly retained for more than 100 years. As many of you know, during the Bolshevik Revolution, Russia's government seized the Schneerson Library, and in 1926 arrested the previous Rebbe for counter-revolutionary activities, namely establishing Jewish schools, and beat him and sentenced him to death by firing squad. The previous Rebbe was ultimately released and later came to the United States, but his books remain imprisoned in Russia. Those books remain under lock and key in Moscow, captives to the same entity that sentenced the previous Rebbe to death. In 2008 and 2010, Chabad won judgments in the federal courts in Washington, D.C., holding that the Schneerson collection was stolen by Russia in violation of international law and must be returned to Chabad. Those rulings won through the brilliant legal work of my colleague Nat Lewin and his daughter Eliza Lewin, has over the past 15 years come under repeated attack by the Russian Federation and its proxies. Recently, the DC Circuit and Appellate Court in Washington vacated the original judgment against the Russian Federation on the ground that the Russian Federation is entitled to sovereign immunity from Chabad's claims. The court did not disturb the judgment that Chabad has won against Russia's government agencies and instrumentalities, specifically the Russian State Library and the Russian State Military Archive, and the Russian Ministry of Culture and Mass Communications. At the direction of the Cunins, we are now pursuing an appeal to the United States Supreme Court, where we will be asking that court to reverse the DC Circuit's ruling and to hold that there's jurisdiction over the Russian Federation as well as over the agencies. As I'm sure you know, the purpose of the lawsuit is to put pressure on the Russian Federation to return the stolen books, the books held captive in Moscow. And in order to do so, Chabad has sought to discover and ultimately to seize assets owned by the Russian Federation and its proxies as a way of putting pressure on Russia to return the books. And currently, the judgment against Russia's agencies is approximately $200 million. On a second front, Chabad is working to recover the Rebbe's correspondence archives, containing more than 35 years of correspondence to and from the Rebbe. And in pursuit of this objective, Chabad recently appeared in court here in Brooklyn in the Appellate Division, Second Department, pursuing its claim. And the argument was, in my experience, truly extraordinary. Not only did the court's questions strongly suggest that it was inclined to adopt our legal arguments and allow us to pursue the case to recover the correspondence archive, but the justices of the Appellate Division affirmatively criticized the strategies, the arguments, and the positions taken by our adversary. One of the justices said, the Rebbe, such a learned man, why would he want one family to control the files of his writings? It simply doesn't make sense, the justice said. Another justice focused on the Rebbe's will, in which he left all his possessions to Chabad. And then he said to the lawyer representing the person who's refusing to return the letters, what is the right thing to do here? And then she looked at him and said, do the right thing. Do the right thing, meaning return the correspondence archive. Now, I can tell you, it's very rare in a court proceeding, particularly an appellate court proceeding, to have a judge tell a lawyer to instruct his client to do the right thing. Here, the return of the Rebbe's correspondence archive to Chabad so it can be reviewed and edited and shared with the world. So on the anniversary of Teves, we're awaiting the ruling of that court, which will, we all hope and pray, move us closer to Chabad obtaining the return of the correspondence archive, and so that we can help fill that beautiful library that you've all built at 770 Eastern Parkway. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening on this wonderful occasion.
So let me, at this point, give a big yashkoach to Steve Lieberman and his firm for handling this litigation. Very difficult and repeated appearances in court against Russia. And while I'm giving a yashkoach, I also ought to mention, which we did not do in the original discussion of the lawsuit that resulted in Teves, to thank Jerry Shestak, the Chrono Lavracha, who later on was president of the American Bar Association, very distinguished lawyer who worked together with me, and Seth Waxman, who ultimately became Solicitor General of the United States years later, for their efforts in the litigation, as well as a whole all-star cast of witnesses who testified pro bono: Elie Wiesel, Louis Jacobs, a whole lineup of very distinguished witnesses who clearly impressed the judge and made the litigation a historic case in terms of this quality and the reputation of the witnesses who testified for Chabad in that litigation. They deserve a lot of the credit, and should Judge Shifton, who was appointed, by the way, that's an interesting fact, that now that that the government, the United States, is in a state of mourning for Jimmy Carter, one of the few things that Jimmy Carter did that was good was appoint Judge Shifton to the district court in Brooklyn. That he was an appointee of Jimmy Carter's and ruled correctly and very courageously and put down those who criticized Chabad. There was a time in the lawsuit during the trial when Barry's lawyers objected to the fact that the seating in the courtroom, every day there were yellow buses that came to court from Crown Heights, select people who won the right to go and watch the trial. And 2 rows were set aside for women. And the rest of the seating in the courtroom was men. And Barry's lawyers protested to the judge about this gender segregation. And Judge Shifton, to his credit, said, I don't see anybody who actually is not sitting where they want to sit. So the judge was very courageous for his time in terms of recognizing the religious convictions of those who came to sit at the trial and watch it.
I underwrite that.
Thank you, Nat. As you were thinking of the attorney's record back in the Garari case, I want to take a moment and remember our dear attorney Marshall Grossman, who back in 2004 when we first filed in court, he was there together with Seth Gerber, Zvika Nissel, Jonathan Stern, who came out to file the lawsuit back in 2004 against the Russian Federation. And I want to take a moment and recognize your colleague, Parker, who puts in quite a deal of time and hours into the case. And may God bless both you, Stephen and Bob, in your leadership in the case. That we should see the fulfillment of the rest of the books to be returned. So there's one book that we're talking about tonight was returned 31 years ago by taking the vice president to go into Moscow and take it. And there's another 7 books that came back on Air Force One. So you want to think about the biggest mitzvah tank ever. And the most expensive mitzvah tank, that would be Air Force One carrying back the Rebbe's books on it. So every time you see that plane take off, think of it as a big mitzvah mobile. And now they had to make another trip, God willing. And I think that plane's big enough to bring the rest back on it. And not 7, but the rest of them. So may our dreams and wishes and prayers come fulfilled. And I think we have a big bus that can pick it up from the airport. So it's time to start preparing for that.
Never ever had the Rebbe done something that was without us, and we have done nothing without the Rebbe. So let's get it back very quickly. God bless you all, and Yudlin, and Lewin, and everybody else. God bless you. Good chant.
Good chant, everybody.
Thank
Thanks
you.
to everyone.
Good job.
Is it over now?
Nat, you want to say a few words to closing? Steve, Robert Krinsky.
Well, this was a wonderful evening. We should have done this before, but it's never too late. We're all very grateful, more than we can say. That I can say to each and every one of you for the Mesiras Nefesh and the dedication you have to the purpose. It made, I think, it helped the Rebbe's life, literally. The Rebbe, and when he spoke about this day, what said about, as far as books are concerned, in the Rebbe's case, the books were his life. And he said that year after year when we marked this August day, and what it meant for his life, and what affects the Rebbe really affects the world Jewish community. We've seen this in the war that's still not over in the Holy Land, that it's having very salutary effect on the Jewish people. People didn't know what tefillin were, and women didn't know what Shabbos lights, candles were. And our numbers show that there's an enormous growth for women in Shabbos Licht, and that's just a part of the improvement in their lives. And the same thing with the men's tefillin. They can't make the tefillin fast enough in Israel to make everybody happy. They're working day and night writing tefillin, making cottons, and for the women, the Shabbos list is an enormous change. And you're all, it's all because of you young man, and all of us together. The togetherness is very important too. We should make these meetings, especially as far as the Rebbe is concerned, the books, the Russian books, because sometimes I'm even like I'm a little behind in the news to pick up the news as to whatever is happening, for better or for even better than better, and have a pleasant future. All your families, wives, husbands, children, grandchildren should be blessed with the Rebbe's blessings for each and every one of you, for good life, for happy life, and contentment. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi